Alright, so in my last video, while I was being, a sad sack, I mentioned something. But I do, for some reason, have a distinct memory of both of us being really into that Raze Flash game. Now, Flash is dead, so in order to record that little bit of footage, I had to download Blue Maxima's Flashpoint. You should too. It's a great way to relive your childhood if you grew up in the era of Flash games like I did. And while I was doing that, I had an idea. Now that my tastes have matured a little bit, I kind of wanted to go back to some of those games and see if I still enjoy them the way I did when I was young. Now, obviously, most Flash games aren't going to be able to meet modern, professionally created game standards, so I will be keeping that in mind and judging them for what they are. So, first up, it made sense to me to review the game in question, Raze. Released in 2010, Raze is a team-based 2D platform shooter, which would be a lot more impressive if it were actually a multiplayer game. It is not. I begin with the human campaign, the easier of the two. First up, mark my territory. The teabag has no animation, so it looks extra goofy. Perfect. Breeze through the tutorial, and the combat so far feels alright. The 2D nature of the game means it doesn't really have the satisfaction of seeing the enemy in the center of your screen like a traditional FPS, but again, it would be unfair to judge it for that. This grenade launcher one-shots the enemy. Remember this, it will be important later. The first real mission, and I spawn in the middle of a group of enemies. They aren't particularly smart, so I'm able to score a few kills without ever really feeling threatened. That is until this dude with a sniper rifle flicks halfway across his damn screen to obliterate my skull the second I drop down from the ledge. And on that note, I'd like to talk about the AI for a second. Since it is a single-player game, the AI is the only thing that makes a match a match. Now, this is all just educated guesswork, but my assumption as to how the AI is coded is that they follow pre-programmed paths around the map, jumping at specific spots in specific directions. They will usually wander around and attempt to find the enemy team, then open fire. I'm pretty sure that smarter AIs will move more and be less likely to hesitate when firing. This does make them harder to hit, and since the AI does not actually attempt to juke, this tendency to move is one of the major deciding factors in how difficult the enemy is to kill. Unfortunately, there aren't actually too many other factors that go into that consideration. For one thing, smarter AIs have better aim. Although, as this enemy on the first level demonstrates, that doesn't really mean much because some weapons are objectively better for the CPU players anyway. Hit-scan marksman weapons, specifically the sniper rifle and railgun, are especially deadly, as there is no way for the player to avoid the projectile, except for breaking line of sight. Not really practical when you yourself are trying to score kills. The other factor in determining the effectiveness of an AI player is numbers. Right now, the enemies have very little HP and damage, or maybe I just have a lot of HP. It will not remain this way. Anyway, I finish off the mission with no trouble, and the next is just more of the same. I should probably go over game modes while we're at it. There are 3: Deathmatch, Elimination, and Juggernaut. Deathmatch and Elimination can either be team-based or free-for-all. That first mission was Team Elimination. Each team has a certain number of lives and loses one for each death. The team that runs out of lives first loses. This second mission is Team Deathmatch, which is extremely similar. Each team scores a point for every member of the enemy team they kill. First team to a certain number wins. The only major difference is how the two game modes handle self-kills. In Elimination, the team will simply lose a life like any other death. But in Deathmatch, the team will lose one of their own points, which, as you will recall, are scored by killing an enemy. This means that deathmatches have a tendency to last slightly longer. Otherwise, though, they are almost identical. This second mission is practically indistinguishable from the first one. Each mission has lore behind it, but aside from the different maps, a lot of them end up feeling samey. Moving on, the next mission is a free-for-all deathmatch. Each player has their own score, and the player must beat all the bots to the target score. It feels like filler, and even in the story, there's no real reason for this level, it's just combat exercises. The repetitiveness of the design is beginning to show through. See, the thing with most team-based shooters, or battle royales or whatever, is that they are populated by people. The replayability of the game comes from the other people because they are irrational and make decisions that a bot cannot or will not. Each match is fundamentally unique and impossible to replicate. This is not the case with bots. Even just a few levels in, I'm starting to notice some consistent quirks that every CPU player seems to have. For example, bots do not seem to go well with the chain gun. They will either not fire it at all, rendering them completely harmless until they either die or pick up a rocket launcher, or they will fire off all of their ammunition immediately. Once they start, they do not stop until they are empty, even if there are no targets nearby. Also, the bots have a tendency to get stuck on this particular piece of floor. Not really sure why. Moving on. The next mission is our first introduction to what I'm going to call number fuckery. Remember how I said that this was one of 3 factors determining difficulty? In this particular mission, the player is by themselves, with no team, but has an absolutely insane amount of HP. Even the weapons which typically one-shot are only doing 9 to 10 damage to me. The match is an absolute massacre, and the bots never stood a chance. At this point, it becomes very clear to me that this manipulation of numbers, from HP values to damage, is basically all the balancing the campaign levels have. Without other players to create difficulty organically, the campaign has no choice but to create it artificially via number fuckery, and the experience suffers as a result. This will become especially obvious later on, but the game quickly devolves into firing at an enemy team composed entirely of bullet sponges with aimbot. For now, though, we are the bullet sponge. The next level has us fighting several robots with similar HP to us, so everyone now takes much longer to kill. Level 7 introduces us to a new character, Sergeant Johnson. This character is, apparently, important. The level description states that, quote, he knows crucial information about the enemy that we need. We never learn what this information is, though, despite successfully rescuing him from the alien assault. I suppose now is as good a time as any to talk about the story. With what I've said so far about the gameplay, I should also mention that even with a fundamentally flawed gameplay loop, I can still enjoy a game substantially if the story is good. But I'm going to be honest, this story has its holes. We never find out why Sergeant Johnson is so important, or why the aliens want to kill him specifically so badly, considering that Sergeant is only 2 ranks above Private. The guy isn't even an officer. Anyway, from what I can tell, the alien invasion has been going on for some time before the events of the human campaign begin. We don't know why the aliens are trying to conquer Earth. Consecutive missions, while sometimes direct follow-ups to the previous level, often feel disjointed. Now the aliens have created a zombie virus. Now we're trying to steal supplies from an alien ship. Now our squad has become infected with the virus and we have to put them down. And now suddenly the alien commander has appeared out of nowhere and we are on the brink of winning the war. When did that happen? Whatever. Let's talk about the boss fight. The alien commander has a rapid-fire marksman weapon that melts my HP if I stand still for too long. However, he only has 1 life, and I have 10. So the fight is a pushover. A little bit disappointing, honestly. Next up, Alien Campaign. The first level here is the first instance of the Juggernaut game mode in the entire game so far. It's like they spent all this time designing it, and then didn't know how to put it into the game in a way that made sense. The premise of this game mode is that one player is the titular Juggernaut with a massive shield, while everyone else is on a team against them. Kill the Juggernaut to become them, kill people as the Juggernaut to score points, first to the target score wins. This game mode takes forever. The AI has a tendency to die before it can score any points. I have nothing else to say about this. Moving on. The Alien campaign is basically the same story from the other side. Since this is supposed to be hard mode, the enemies are starting to become very tanky and have scarily good aim. Still, the first few levels are no trouble. We casually commit some more crimes and then are sent to capture Sergeant Johnson. Again, the game gives no reason for this. They call him a leader, which again makes no sense if he's just a sergeant. Maybe the aliens don't have a great understanding of human military hierarchy. I don't know. Some more levels pass without incident. We get to play as a zombie, which is cool. And then this fucking level. The one previous was actually somewhat similar, but this level cranks it up to the maximum. Number fuckery in its purest form. We are meant to play an elimination match against these robots, but my team of alien soldiers just can't. The bots have so much HP. Remember that grenade launcher that one-shot enemies at the start of the game? Not even 25%. This difficulty is excessively artificial because that's all the game can really do with its own mechanics. The fundamental premise never changes. The enemies don't fight any differently. They just have bigger numbers. After an extensively frustrating number of attempts, I finally managed to beat that level. The one after it is significantly easier for some reason. We are fighting humans instead of robots this time. And then, for whatever reason, the final boss is Sergeant Johnson, somehow brought back from being infected with the zombie virus. Why did they spend so much money saving this dude? Who the hell is this guy? The question is never answered, unfortunately. That is the end of the game. All we have now is the quick match, which has even less customization than the actual game. No number fuckery, at least, but there is almost zero replayability here. And yet I can't bring myself to hate this game. As I said, I loved this game as a kid. The story was serviceable in spite of its holes, or maybe I just didn't notice them at the time. I honestly don't understand how I feel about this fully. On the one hand, the premise is actually pretty decent. There aren't really a whole lot of 2D platform shooters. Unfortunately, the gameplay is terminally hampered by the lack of other players. It never was a multiplayer game. I don't think it was ever going to be one. But the game is focusing so hard on emulating actual multiplayer games that it doesn't stop to think about what makes those games work, and that its own strategy fundamentally can't match that. Right, well, I've been talking long enough. Should probably wrap this review up. At the end of the day, this game is a skeleton of what every team shooter has, boiled down to numbers and bots. But again, it would be unfair to judge a Flash game from 2010 by today's standards, right? But could I not also assume that the game's flaws are the results of the creator's overestimation of what Flash can actually do? Either way, my final verdict is that this game is a good first attempt. I'm actually going to look at the sequel next, which Kid Me believed to be a marked improvement. We'll see if that opinion holds. Until then, this is Jake, keeping my promise to nobody, signing off.
Consider it done.